lurks a beast like no other. Tsunamis. The Japanese word for harbor waves appear without warning. They are triggered by seismic events, such as earthquakes and volcanoes that generate a displacement of the seafloor and massive underwater waves. These waves travel undetected across the ocean at jet speed. When they reach land, the waves slow down, but not before they've grown to terrifying heights, towering walls of water that can devour entire cities.
Tsunamis are among the most misunderstood of all natural disasters. Unlike many other natural disasters like hurricanes, you know that something's coming because the wind starts to blow really fast or it starts to rain really hard. There are no real natural signs in advance that a tsunami's coming until the water actually starts to move.
For centuries, tsunamis have puzzled scientists because few people who have actually witnessed the disaster have lived to tell about it. But today, state-of-the-art technology is beginning to solve the mysteries behind this natural-born killer. It's a frigid afternoon in the North Pacific. These scientists are braving the stormy seas to deploy the most promising technology in the field of tsunami research. DART, or Deep Ocean Assessment and Reporting of Tsunamis, are buoys that detect and measure a tsunami in the open ocean. The high-tech tool was engineered by NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association.
And in a sense, it's a system of systems on guard looking for tsunamis. If something is reported out in the ocean, it's sent back to shore, where someone on shore can make a decision about, do I call a tsunami warning, or is everything all normal?
This is how DART works. It consists of a seafloor bottom pressure recording system, or BPR, capable of detecting tsunamis as small as 1 centimeter, and a moored surface buoy for real-time communications. An acoustic link is used to transmit data from the BPR on the seafloor to the surface buoy. The data is then relayed via a satellite link to ground stations throughout the Pacific, which disseminate information to tsunami warning centers. The goal is obvious: to reduce loss of life and property.
The interesting thing, it only takes about 2 minutes for this whole communication path to take place. That goes from the seafloor to the buoy, relayed to the satellite to shore.
Back at NOAA's headquarters in Seattle, Washington, a flagship for tsunami research, a team of scientists and engineers is constantly fine-tuning the mooring technology, which has taken 25 years to develop.
What we're looking here as part of the DART system is the bottom pressure recorder. Now this is the part that's on the seafloor, and it's really the heart and soul of the entire system. Inside of the electronics is a bourdon pressure tube sensor which can very, very accurately measure the pressure. And this is what's actually measuring the height of the water above the bottom pressure recorder. Inside the single board computer in the CPU is an acoustic modem that talks to this transducer out here. Now this is the unit that actually communicates with the buoy, and there's a similar unit on top of the buoy. And these guys talk every hour, make sure they're reading the proper pressure parameters and that everything's as normal in the normal condition. We're always trying to improve the technology. Presently what you have is a system that's reporting from the seafloor to a computer lab. What we're hoping to do is make it a bidirectional system. That is, the warning guidance guy or the researcher could sit behind the computer and actually talk to the seafloor and query it. Say, I'd like to know what your pressure is right now. And it'll report its pressures back in near real time.
For the last 3 years, 6 buoys have been gathering data in earthquake-prone regions of the Pacific, where most tsunamis have been triggered in the past. But the DART system cannot work alone. It relies on technology from the earthquake community to answer the most fundamental technological questions. What generates a tsunami? How fast does it travel? How large are its waves? And most important, how much destruction will it cause once it hits land? Tsunamis are often confused with tidal waves, which occur twice a day and are caused by the gravitational effects of the sun and moon. Tsunamis, on the other hand, are rare because a unique and infrequent series of circumstances is required to generate them. Each year, approximately 1 or 2 tsunamis take place worldwide. They are triggered after one or more violent geological events. They can be caused by landslides that flow into the ocean and displace water, or submarine landslides that occur entirely undersea. The explosion or collapse of underwater volcanoes can also trigger tsunamis. But the largest and most destructive tsunamis are spawned by underwater earthquakes. Large vertical shifts of the Earth's crust are caused by plates that rub together. The plate boundaries where these shifts occur are called faults. Throughout the Pacific Ocean, plates slip in a process known as subduction, which causes earthquakes to occur. The amount of vertical and horizontal motion of the seafloor may bring about a simultaneous slumping of underwater sediments due to the shaking. The energy is transferred from the Earth's crust to the ocean water, generating the tsunami.
If the seafloor were uplifted by a few meters over a very broad area, you could imagine that it would actually create a mound of water on the ocean surface that would be a few meters high as well. And this water would want to come back down, but in the process of going back to equilibrium, it's going to send out waves in all directions. It's quite analogous to throwing a pebble in a pond and seeing the waves go out in all directions.
Once the seismic event occurs, a tsunami begins to travel undersea. Seismographs located in facilities around the world record its magnitude. The information is processed by sophisticated computers, which determine the height and wavelength of the tsunami. The wavelength is set by the size of the ocean bottom region that moves and generates the wave or waves. Whereas waves caused by the wind are rarely longer than 1,000 feet from crest to crest, a tsunami wavelength can exceed 100 miles. How fast a tsunami travels depends on the water depth and the acceleration of gravity. For example, where the ocean is approximately 18,000 feet deep, an unnoticed tsunami can move at 500 miles per hour and span the entire Pacific Ocean in just one day. This map shows the tsunami travel times for an earthquake off the coast of Chile. Each concentric curve represents 1 hour. In the open ocean, the tsunami may be hardly noticeable, perhaps only a few inches in height. As it travels into shallower water, the tsunami builds to a steep pitch, sometimes reaching a height of 30 to 70 feet.
As it approaches the coastline, though, the water becomes much shallower. The energy is then confined to a smaller volume of water, and then the energy starts to push the wave higher and higher.
When a tsunami finally reaches the coast, it may appear as rapidly rising or falling tides or a series of breaking waves. In the worst case, a tsunami comes on shore as a turbulent wall of water. One of the largest tsunamis in history struck Alaska's Lituya Bay in 1958. The water rushed up 1,740 feet, almost 500 feet higher than the Empire State Building.
You can define tsunamis in 2 categories. One being locally generated, that's immediately off your coast, and the tsunami arrives almost instantaneously. And then distant tsunamis, where an earthquake may occur in Alaska, for example. It'll be local to Alaska people, but it may be a distant tsunami to people that live in Hawaii and the west coast of the United States.
The last large Pacific-wide tsunami was triggered by an 8.6 magnitude earthquake off the coast of Chile in 1960. It killed over 2,000 people and caused $500 million in damage, not only in Chile, but as far away as Hawaii and Japan. A tsunami topples everything in its path. When it hits land, it strips beaches, undermines trees, and floods hundreds of meters inland, crushing homes and taking human lives. To help mitigate future disasters, oceanographers and engineers at NOAA have an arsenal of technology. This includes computerized inundation models that map the danger zones on coastlines.
It simulates the probable tsunami for this particular area, and the model can then estimate the wave heights and the inundation distances.
The numerical models are made up of a set of mathematical equations, which are fed into high-speed computers. The models take into account the magnitude of the seismic event, the topography of the ocean, and the makeup of the coastline where a tsunami is likely to hit. The computer models also calculate the raw wave data signaled from the DART buoy systems out at sea.
So then the forecasters can determine, how many waves there are, what's the time spacing between the waves, what's the amplitude of the waves, and then this can in turn be fed into a model that can then give a little more guidance in terms of who you would evacuate, what could be the expected arrival time, and what could be the amplitude that we might expect when it hits shore.
Today's technology has opened a window into the world of tsunamis, but even with all of the latest high-tech tools, scientists still rely on the past to get real answers about these giant killer waves.
The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was the deadliest in recorded history. The previous record was the 1703 tsunami at Awa, Japan, that killed more than 100,000 people. Modern marvels will return in a moment.
Despite incredible advances in technology, we are still at the mercy of nature. Seismologists cannot predict when earthquakes will occur, and therefore cannot determine when tsunamis will be triggered. As a result, scientists study historical tsunamis to better understand how to design instruments to predict future disasters. According to myth, a tsunami may explain the biblical story of Moses and the parting of the Red Sea, when the Israelites were fleeing Egypt. As a tsunami reaches shore, water is sometimes withdrawn to expose the sea floor. In this case, perhaps water was withdrawn from shore to shore, which would have allowed the Israelites to cross. However, one of the first written records of a tsunami dates back to 1470 BC, when the Greek philosopher Plato wrote, "A great civilization was destroyed by earthquakes and floods." It is believed that he was referring to the volcano Santorini, now on the Greek island of Thera, which had erupted and caused catastrophic tsunami waves almost 300 feet high. They impacted the entire region. Some scientists speculate that this tsunami sunk the lost island civilization of Atlantis. The Great Lisbon earthquake of 1755 generated a tsunami wave that penetrated a half-mile into the city, wiping out buildings and bridges and taking 50,000 lives. In 1883, in the Sunda Straits between Java and Sumatra, now Indonesia, the volcano Krakatoa erupted and created tsunami waves as tall as a 12-story building. It was the most catastrophic disaster in history at that time. The waves swept over 4 miles inland, killing 33,000. The world quickly learned about the disaster thanks to a new invention,